Hello and welcome to The Information, where you'll get all the information on the latest in indie pop, electronic, and experimental music. Today I'll be doing a review of the new Groundislava album, Groundislava 2. Now for those unfamiliar with Groundislava, he goes by Jasper Patterson, and he's been making music under the moniker Groundislava since about early 2011. His self-titled album came out in 2011 on Friends of Friends Records, which is also home to several other artists like Shlomo and Different Sleep. And generally he's known for his 8-bit, sci-fi, video game-esque synthesizer sounds and soundtracks. He has come out with quite a number of albums and EPs since then, most recently being his Endless Voyage EP/mini album that came out last year. Just under a year later after the release of his Endless Voyage EP, we now have another Groundislava album to check out, this one being billed as a lost sequel to the original Groundislava debut. And I really wanted to review this album in particular now because I was coming into this in a very interesting position where I had actually not yet heard the original Groundislava LP. I came onto his music a little bit later down the road, right when he was about to release Frozen Throne. So whereas the more hardcore or longtime fan might be familiar with both the original and this new one here, kind of repeating some similar sounds and textures and melodies, I'm coming into this thing and not hearing the original, so all of these sounds are new to me and I really wanted to kind of come into it with fresh ears. I will say right out of the gate, one of my issues with the album was the sequencing, at least early on in the record. I found the first 3 tracks to be very plodding, very underwhelming. Definitely not the tracks I would have picked to kick off the record. Things start out with Snow Dream, which is a purposely very icy and chilly intro. We get a classic video game 8-bit lead. Some more elements are introduced later on in the track. We get like a pitched down synthetic vocal. We get some subtle synth bass that gets introduced. There's a little bit of metallic percussion, but everything feels kind of basic, kind of just cut and paste. It doesn't really feel like there's a moment where it coalesces into some big moment. It just feels like a bunch of continuous little snippets. It doesn't really ever get going into a proper song, I feel. And the same can kind of be said with City Dream. I think that's a little bit better of a track, and at least the ending of Snow Dream does kind of slow down and turn into a transition into City Dream, which is really nice. That kind of makes it a little bit more memorable. But overall, City Dream, at least compared to Snow Dream, is a much more darker track. You get a really thick sub bass, you get some dark down-tempo 808 hits. It's more of a classic hip-hop beat for sure. There's not really too much else to say about this track, other than that you do kind of get some similar instrumentation from Snow Dream on City Dream here, with the repetition of the same pitched down synthetic vocals. And the trifecta of underwhelming tracks kind of ends off with Never Told You, which was one of the previous singles leading up to the album. I just felt the drum pattern here was too slow, too simple, too boring really, to really give the track any sort of energy or momentum. There's a very cheap sounding reverb that really comes across very badly on the kick especially, though I will say there are some bright cascading synth lines that sort of trickle down over top of the beat. There's a very menacing synth bass here too, and the breakdown towards the middle of the track does have a really nice chord progression. It's very moody. It very much reminds me of like a Miami Vice kind of thing, but overall I would say that the track is just kind of too plodding, and the mix ends up getting a little bit too busy. There's too many elements that are kind of happening and kind of clashing. Things get going pretty nicely though on the next track, Bog, which is a very cool, adventurous, exploratory synth arpeggio, which reminds me a little bit of like first generation Pokemon games, like Game Boy Color stuff. It's followed pretty soon after with a beat that sounds to me a lot like some early Shlomo, like Bad Vibes era Shlomo. A very organic set of percussion. There's lots of hisses of white noise and like resonant square bass, and what sound like keys rattling as well, giving it an extra layer of texture. There's a moment where the track sort of gets turned down into a low pass filter, and he introduces this really gorgeous ambient melody over top of everything. And this part here builds to an even better section towards the end of the track, where we get these images, I feel in my mind, of like 2 video game characters doing some sort of very regal dance in like a crystal palace or like a ballroom made out of ice or something like that. It's very fanciful, kind of dreamlike sound. Afterwards, we get Micro Impasse, which is our first interlude, which breaks things up a little bit. I will say it does have a quirky 8-bit drum beat with some really fun percussion and melodies. There's layers of interesting synth leads that sort of pile on one on top of another that sound really nice together. If anything, this was one of the tracks that I wish actually would have been extended a little bit longer so he could flesh it out more and turn this into a full-length tune. But after about a minute and a half, it does fade out pretty quickly, and we're introduced again to the next track. This one's Sleep Cycles. This has a very strange beat to it. It's very sloppy, very purposefully lazy programmed drums. It almost sounds like they're constantly trying to trip over themselves. There's loud, thundering thuds of toms that are going on, some brooding synth pads. This is definitely the track that has the biggest sci-fi influence out of any of them. It's very reminiscent, again going back to the Miami Vice thing, of Crockett's theme. Very misty, very nocturnal, and the low end sounds really nice, which is the first track that really, the low end stands out to me as a positive. And then about halfway down the track list, we get what I believe to be the best song on the record, which is Wait Forever. Much like in Micro Impasse, we get an intro which has some fun, plinky synths. These quickly give way to some really lush, beautiful instrumentation and synth pads. This song also benefits from some compositional strengthenings. There's a lot of proper builds and transition sounds, and it sounds a lot more polished than any of the other tracks on the album. These sections keep getting bigger and bigger and growing with more expansive and lush synths. He changes out the drum patterns and percussion as well to keep things fresh. And the last two choruses are just they sound so good. However, right after this, we do get another clunker of a song, Flawed Fortress. I felt this had some intriguing percussion placement within the beat, but overall it's still kind of a sleepy track. There are some fairly insistent hi-hats and swirling synths going around, and there's some nice syncopated drums in the second half, but overall, again, it's just another song that I feel doesn't do enough to keep the listener's interest. Right after this, we get Time Alone, which is the banger of the bunch. This track I really thought would have benefited best from a vocal or even like some rap verses. This track without a doubt has the most hard-hitting beat, some definite trap influences here, and the song itself kind of can't sit still. It turns very quickly into this double time breakbeat section, which is a very unexpected switch up because it happens, I think, a little too soon in the track, but it is something that sounds very nice. And again, this is another track where the low end stands out very nicely as well. About halfway through the track, we get another surprise with some really nice, distorted, aggressive sub-bass lines. It's at this section in the song that it gives me more Shlomo vibes again, probably something off of his album Dark Red, like Beams or something like that, the final track. And the last chorus really, again, brings all of the elements together very nicely. It's a very cohesive, masterful finish. The outro track here, Until Tomorrow, features a more patient approach, at least in the intro. It's more of a soundtrack. There's a little bit of field recording of like some falling rain in the distance. It's a little more ambient. There's like a deep sawtooth synth bass that kind of simmers in the background, and there's a really nice 303 acid bass arpeggio that's kind of bouncing around as well. I like that more importance was placed on sound design and restraint here on this track. Once the beat does come in, there isn't much of a drop, but it's still a very nice, refreshing moment where everything kind of falls to the wayside and you just get this beat, a little bit of synth instrumentation, and that field recording. It's a very nice, pleasant sound on the ears. It reminds me a little bit of Aphex Twin in this moment, but sadly we don't linger on the moment for very long, although I will say that the last minute or so of the track does pick up again. There's some really nice claps and a cool modulated synth arpeggio. The percussion here overall is a little bit simple, but it's understated and very effectively used, and they complement the melodies very nicely. I think it makes for a really good, solid final track to end things off. Overall, I'd have to say, for a batch of older unreleased tunes, I think that these still hold a lot of water. I think these are pretty enjoyable tunes in spurts. They definitely have their moments. Ultimately, this album lacks exciting production and catchy, engaging melodies. A lot of moments sound very nice, and there's some really good atmospheres in here, but I don't think that they're able to consistently carry the album. You do get a couple good tracks here and there that are great from beginning to end, and even some of the interludes are fairly engaging as well. But I think because this album starts off a little slow with those first three tracks that I mentioned, it kind of takes a while to get going, and though it does pick up in the end, I feel like basically you're getting about 50% good tracks and 50% kind of clunkers. So for those who, again, do enjoy Groundislava's sound already, you're just going to find more stuff that you like here. I really can't see any hardcore fans having anything to complain about on this record, but as more of a casual fan, as more of a latecomer to his sound, I didn't think it was bad at all, but I definitely think that he could do better, and fortunately he has done better, as these are obviously older tunes. But overall I would give this like a strong 6 or a light 7, something like that. It's not a bad effort, certainly being older material I'm impressed with how well it holds up still. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the album. If you enjoyed this new Groundislava album, Groundislava 2, let me know what you think. Did you have a favorite track, least favorite track? Did you like what I had to say? Did you have some other thoughts in mind? Let me know. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for checking this video and channel out. I hope you guys have a good day, and thanks for watching The Information.